Watching every single NBA game is literally impossible. But my job is to stay connected to all 30 NBA teams, to help other people stay connected to all 30 NBA teams. So a question I get a lot is, Kenny, how do you consume a day of basketball if we have a day with 10 or more games? Because that's exactly what happened last night. And I think I made a video like this like 3 to 4 years ago, but since then my strategy has completely shifted. So this is kind of like a staple video for the people that ask this question. I'll just send it to them. This is how I keep up with the league. So there were 12 games on last night. I thought it was 10. It was 12 games on last night. And what I would normally do when it's a slate this large is pick and choose which games I want to be completely locked in on. And if a slate is 10 or more, I traditionally pick 4 different games. So last night it was Pistons versus Hornets. Why? Because we do a stream on playback TV where we watch these games live with y'all. I'll put the link in the description if you're interested. We do it every single Wednesday. And this is the game we got. It was a Brandon Miller game winner game. So that was pretty dope to see a game winner live. But things get kind of tricky because this game tipped off at 6 o'clock Central, while the Warriors versus Celtics game tipped off at 6:30 Central. Now, because I was locked into this game and not just locked in on my own, but performing and interacting with the chat and everything, I pretty much missed the first half of Celtics versus Warriors, but this was one of the 4 games I wanted to be locked in on. So I watched the second half of this and then went back to watch the first half. So I'm just counting this as 2 games that I was locked into. Game number 3 happened to be Lakers versus Grizzlies. And I made this decision before the report came out that Anthony Davis and Rui were going to miss the game. But I had already made my decision up because I haven't been able to watch a ton of Grizzlies live. So I wanted to watch the Grizzlies. Also wanted to watch Bron. And though it wasn't a close game, we did get a masterclass from Bron. So that was kind of cool. And then my last game was my Bulls, which is kind of in a league of his own. Because when I watch the Bulls, I'm not completely like taking a ton of notes about them, specifically in a season like this where they're not trying, or they are trying, but they're not a good team. And I don't know if you noticed, game number 4, this Bulls versus Mavericks game pretty much ended around, let's say, 9:30 as these other games are tipping off. But I want y'all to remember, I am also a dad and a husband. So I have to divvy up my time accordingly. So when these other games are starting to tip off, that is the time when we get the baby ready for bed. We get her washed up. She takes her bath and we get her to read her books. We tell her stories. We do all of this to put her to bed. And then I would watch the 4th quarter of Suns versus Heat or the 4th quarter of Thunder versus Nuggets. And so on and so forth. But what I will say is even the games that I'm not locked into, I'm keeping track of the score in case it is close in the last 3 to 4 minutes. And if it's not a game I'm watching live, I will turn over or add them in a quad box to see the last couple possessions of a close game. All right, that's a lot explaining. It's the next day, though. It is the next day now. Again, I've already covered my bases on Hornets versus Pistons, on Warriors versus Celtics. Dropped the video on that earlier. Also with the Lakers and the Grizz and the Bulls and the Mavericks. So now I have to try to consume the rest of the game. There's absolutely nothing better in the world when it comes to trying to keep up with the game better than watching it, like literally watching the game. But I used to work at this supplement shop, and a supplement is exactly what the definition is. It is not a substitution for the main thing, but it is something that you add on top. So let's think about something like vitamin C, right? So, vitamin C is a tablet or a pill that a lot of people in the world take, but it should be added on top of you getting vitamin C in your diet. And that's the way I feel about reading articles. I would wake up every single morning and I would read articles about the games before I actually watch the games, because I think it gives me an opportunity to kind of get a feel for what the game was in order to help me look for certain things when I do eventually go back to watch the film. So last night, New York Knicks versus Atlanta Hawks, that was a game I cannot wait to see. Zachary Richardson had his career night. He had over 30 points. 30 points on 61% shooting, 6 for 10 from 3. That is a breakout game from a guy in a worse or bad rookie class. So I would read this article, and I will, after I show you the example, read this article, and it kind of gives me an idea of what was going on with Zachary. So when I go back to watch that game, boom, I have an idea. Or this one. This is a game that this might be my first watch of the morning. The OKC Thunder lost to a team without Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon. I did watch the last 3 minutes of this game live, but I need to see what led up to that. I know Brody had a very great game, his best game as a Denver Nugget player, but I will, they got a listen to feature. Now, if you have a listen to feature, I'll be honest with you, I'll listen to it while doing some other stuff. But someone wrote an article, shout out to Bennett. Bennett wrote this article at the Denver Post. I would read this completely through, and then I would go on to watch that team. And listen, a lot of these articles are specifically about this game, right? So over here at Space City Scoop, they have an article by James Piercy, and he gave us three studs from their game against the Spurs. So Dylan Brooks was great, I guess. I did watch the first quarter of this game and watched Dylan Brooks guard Wemby. Jacques Landale was great, and Fred VanVleet had his best game of the season. As I watched this box score, he was 21 points, and he only missed one shot the entire day while giving us 10 assists and 7 rebounds. So I'll watch that, and now I'll look for exactly what was going on with Dylan Brooks or Jacques Landale and Freddie. But sometimes we get pieces like this, and this is from The Athletic, and I think this is behind the paywall, so I don't want to stroll too much so I don't get in trouble. But Kelly Iko, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, dropped an entire article about Jalen Green, and Jalen Green has been pretty damn good this season, and this will give me another example of what to look for when I'm watching Jalen Green. How did I find these articles? It's a combination of a couple different things. Sometimes I literally just type in Denver Nuggets and go to the news feature on Google and look at the articles that were published within the last day. Also go to Substack. Substack is something that was incorporated to my routine as of this season. It was definitely not something I thought about at all going into it, but I've subscribed to a couple different people. Shout out to Mike Sher. Listen, I'm terrible at pronouncing names. But Mike also has his own Substack, and his writing is phenomenal. Where this one specifically, Basketball Intelligence, I think I pay $5 a month for this. And basically what they do is they aggregate a bunch of different stories from across the league. So these are stories that are just about the league at whole. So the Jonte Porter rule, which I didn't know was a real thing. I'll probably read this and figure out what the hell is going on. But then they break it up. Like if you want to read about the Atlanta Hawks, that Zachary Richase article that I showed you is from here. So they break it up every single morning. So I kind of can get an understanding of, I could read every single one of these articles in a day. And it'll only take me, an hour or two to get through 20 to 30 articles, depending on who the writer is. And then I can go back here and watch said game. So like this one right here, and I can't watch these games live with y'all because you know how the NBA gets. Once upon a time, I used to go into these games blind, right? Where I didn't look at the box score, I didn't look at the final score, and it was kind of like a new experience. I thought that prevented me from being really active to figure out what a certain team did to win or a certain team did to lose. So now having the final box score helps a lot. Where like Karl-Anthony Towns ended up 34-16 and 3 blocks, and he shot 23 shots. It looks like a pretty solid on paper game for him. But now I get to see, again, what happened with these top 4 players here where they all have phenomenal games. Clint Capella, perfect from the field. I'm guessing those are mostly lobs. Perfect from the field. Trae Young, I saw the clip of him telling New York Knicks fans to take y'all ass home. So what did they do that kind of exposed the New York Knicks defense? And I think there's a couple different ways you can do this if you're taking my advice. Some people, and I think my boy D Mills does this, where he says, Zachary, let me click every single possession that you had that you shot the ball. You know, we can look at his shot plot here and say, oh, he made some threes, he got it at the rim, he got a mid-range jump shot in here. And some people literally sit here and just watch how Zachary moved with and without the ball that led to him getting shots. And this is something I would do if I'm not necessarily pressed to figure out exactly how a result got there. For example, no disrespect, I'm not surprised when the Wizards lose a basketball game. So instead of watching the Wizards game at whole, and I have sometimes, but instead of watching the game at whole, I would say, okay, I want to see what Bilal Coulibaly did offensively. The downside to this method is it doesn't show you like Bilal Coulibaly's defensive impact because I'm only watching his offensive possessions that he ended in a shot. It doesn't tell you what Zachary Richase did off the ball this entire game. But if you just want a bite-sized piece of what a player did in the game, this is the best way you can do it in a matter of 5 to 10 minutes. What a great pass and a great backdoor from him. That's really smart. It's really smart basketball. But because I'm invested in the New York Knicks and them potentially being contenders, it's important for me to not just watch Zachary's breakout game, but watch the Knicks at home. Another game, I did watch the last couple minutes of Heat versus Suns. The Heat lose. It's a battle of the hot shit. The Suns have been great in the clutch this season. I watched their last couple minutes of this one as well, but the Heat have been so very disappointing to me. Was this game different than the others? Like looking at the box score, Bam Adebayo, other than his last game against the Wizards, had been pretty neutral offensively, not playing well, not getting shots up. In this game, he shot 23% from the 5-man, and he did have 5 steals and a block. But Tyler Hero has been great this season. So I can look at this box score and kind of get an idea, but it won't tell me the full story. So this is another one of those games where I will click in to say watch full game. And watching full games don't take as long as you think because the NBA has already cut out all the commercials. So we're looking at an hour and 53 minutes, but it's really not that, right? It takes 7 minutes for me to get to tip off, more than 7 minutes, boom. So tip off is 8 minutes in. And then what I will do is fast forward through free throws and anytime they're at the monitors and so on and so forth. So this hour and 50-minute game can really turn into an hour 20. And the best part about this is that I love my job. So like I watched a lot of basketball yesterday and I get to wake up and watch a bunch of basketball again today. And when I'm all done with my watching of these games that I'm really interested in, we probably have an hour or two before the next slate starts. So my day is really a lot of basketball, and I'm not complaining whatsoever. I also saw that Jusuf Nurkic had a really good game here, and I think it's interesting that starting off, they opted to have Bam Adebayo guarding Kevin Durant, which kind of makes sense to me. I don't really trust Nikola Jovic, and Jovic put on some extra muscle and weight this year, and maybe their idea is to have him be the center guarder and let Bam be the roamer, but then you can't roam off Kevin Durant. So it's very situational, very matchup based. But I did see that Jusuf Nurkic had a really good game. So what does Eric Spoelstra do to nullify Jusuf Nurkic eventually? I don't really know. I also try to use my Twitter feed. It's just a little bit more difficult because I don't exclusively follow basketball things. But what I will recommend is going over to the list feature on X. And you can create your own list or find other people, right? So somebody has a list right here of NBA analysis with 29 members. So if you want to keep up with the league through stats and writings, some people like Jordan Newman here has already put together a list of people. And of these 29 people, we got some really good names in here. We got some really, really good names in here. So you might just be able to follow this. You can get your NBA fix through tweets, right? So this is the article that we just mentioned earlier that I wanted to get around to watching. Nate Duncan, I guess he dropped the podcast episode. And then we got things like this where you can get some film breakdown from random people. But I haven't done this, but you can also curate your own. You find a few people on X or on Twitter that are giving film breakdowns or dropping articles or dropping NBA knowledge. So your whole timeline doesn't have to be strictly basketball, but you can go into your list and say, Nekias Duncan said this. Let me go listen to it. Oh, Nate Duncan dropped the podcast. Let me go do that. So there are so many different ways to consume the game. That is traditionally how I would get things done. So yeah, this is just a way for me to explain to y'all. Now I actually got to get my ass to work. Let me know what you think. Leave a like, subscribe.